the Rambam sheets of share scheme. Okay. Okay. We are all set. Okay, so let's get started here. Good morning, good afternoon. Good. I don't think anyone's good evening, so that's good. I hope that you'll find it interesting as well. About the mitzvah of what's called Shvisah on Yom Tov. Okay, that's a little confusing as to what that means. We all know that on Yom Tov we have a lot of halachos that mimic the halachos on Shabbos, right? There's a lot of things that, right? And generally when we say they mimic them, unfortunately we look at it in the negative, right? Like there's you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that, you're not allowed to do them on Yom Tov, you're not allowed to do them on Shabbos, right? So that's the not doing something. You see in the Torah it says lo sasu, not do melachah. So the day, and then it will say that you can't do melachah, right? Lo sasu melachah, but to as much. And the reason why it's not paid attention to is because nobody really understands the need. Okay, I get that I'm not allowed to do, but like a positive command of not doing something when I already have the negative. Have this prohibition of not destroying things on Shabbos, okay, and I have it not on Yom Tov, and then I have a mitzvah that tells me that I must rest on these days from essentially the exact same actions. So if I already have a prohibition against doing it, so then what is the positive command add to it? And that's what usually throws us off. And that's why people don't generally talk about these things. They just they just say, okay, whatever it is, what it is. And no one actually focuses on the positive command. Okay, so the mitzvah to rest. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. And what's interesting is essentially for all the chagim that we have, Rosh Hashanah, Pesach, Sukkot, Shavuos, all the chagim, the mitzvah is the same mitzvah. It's the mitzvah of Shvisah. So that also is like odd that it's repeated over and over. So we want to look at this mitzvah and we want to say, okay, what's the mitzvah here? What exactly am I supposed to do, right? When I talk about a mitzvah, that I have a mitzvah to do something. So it's strange to say that I have a mitzvah to do something, but then the mitzvah is essentially not to do something, which sounds like a prohibition. Does everybody see the problem? Right? That's essentially that's the problem that we have. So a lot of people don't look at this mitzvah; they just see it as a mirror of the prohibitions, and that's what they go about doing. Okay, so everybody understand that's essentially what we're trying to figure out the mitzvah of Shvisah on Yom Tov. That's what we're looking at. So again, we're going to take the same methodology that we always do. We're going to look at the psukim. We're going to look at the way that the Rambam describes the mitzvah. We're going to look at essentially the same exact process. All right, I'm a man of great habits, so the same exact process. We're going to look at the same methodology, and we're going to see if there's something strange that sticks out when we start looking at these halachos. And maybe from the strange things, that'll get us to start looking at things in a different light. Right, and then when we look at things in a different light, that's where we start to understand things. Everybody got it? Any questions before we begin? Nope. Okay, everything makes sense? Okay, good. Okay, so let's look at the first source. Okay, the first source is the Rambam in the Sefer Mitzvos. Now, again, we're going to be looking at many different mitzvahs. We're going to be looking at the 159th mitzvah, the 160th, 162nd, 166th, and 167th mitzvah. Right? They're going to be looking at all of those. At all 5 of those mitzvahs, okay? Some of them the Rambam is going to describe in one line, and some of them the Rambam is going to go into great detail. So he says as follows. Actually, you know what? I forgot that we already did the introductory share. I was about to start going through all the Myra Komos and start going through everything again. So we don't have to do that because we already gave the introductory share. So let's just discuss the main points of these mitzvahs. So what's interesting in the 159th mitzvah, which is to rest on the first day of Pesach. So there, in this Aleph the Rambam goes into a little more detail, right? And he says as follows. He says that these mitzvos, that these days are called Yom Tovim. He says all the mitzvos are exactly, the mitzvah Shvisah is all the same, right? Of every Yom Tov, there's a los asay and asay here, okay? And he's right. That's in essence, that's what he says. He says the same thing. Okay, so which leads us to our first question of, and this is what we talked about in the introduction. What is the nature of the mitzvah of Shvisah on Yom Tov? And when I say what the nature of the mitzvah is, so exactly what is the mitzvah, right? So that's what I'm asking. What is the mitzvah of Shvisah? If I would ask you in one line to tell me what the mitzvah of Shvisah is, and you would tell me it's to rest, so then I would ask you, right, the next question of what's the difference between resting and the Isser of melachah, right? So you tell me there's a positive command to rest, right? That's what everybody does. Like, no, you understand this. You have a mitzvah to rest. Okay, what does that mean? I have a mitzvah to rest. You can tell it to me. You can say it to me 500 times. It doesn't explain it anymore. That's what's going to end up happening. If you ask most people who haven't thought this through, right, and again, including me 2 weeks ago, right? So you say, well, okay, there's a negative command not to do work, and then I'm gonna try very hard. I can't stand when people use, and I just did it myself over and over, the terms negative and positive to describe mitzvos. It doesn't apply. Okay, so these are the terms we're going to use. There's what people classically call a negative command. We're going to call prohibition because that's what it is. And then when it comes to a positive command, one of the 248 mitzvos that we have to do something, we're just going to call them mitzvos, right? They're mitzvos. These are something you have to do. Okay, so a mitzvah generally has action to it. There's something that must be done. I must do something. So when it comes to the mitzvah of Shvisah, right? So I want to know what the nature of that mitzvah is, and then I want to know, right? If you tell me in one line what the mitzvah does, what does the mitzvah accomplish? What's its objective? Again, not philosophically. I'm not asking why do we rest, but I'm asking very simply. You tell me I have to put on tefillin in the morning. I get that, okay? Move into a sukkah for 7 days, right? That's what I must do. I must move into a sukkah for 7 days. Okay, all of that I understand. There's an action I have to do. Okay, here I'm being told that there's an action, there's a mitzvah to refrain from acting. So what objective am I trying to reach? What am I trying to do? Am I being clear on the question? I feel like I'm not reaching it. Everybody understands what I'm saying? I'm not just asking, I want to make it clear. I'm not just asking, which is a valid question in of itself, but I want to show you that I'm going a little further. I'm not just asking the question of what do I have to do to fulfill the mitzvah. I'm not just asking for my action list. I'm asking for something more here. I'm asking for what's the halachic objective of this mitzvah of Shvisah. So for instance, the halachic objective of eating a sukkah is that I reach a level where I am living in the sukkah. Okay, the halachic objective that I have is to be one who is living in the sukkah. Okay, so what is the halachic objective of Shvisah on Yom Tov? And if there is a halachic objective, how is that not being accomplished by the prohibition of doing work on Yom Tov? Right, that's my question. That's what I don't understand. So okay, everybody got it?
Yeah. So I mean, in essence, it doesn't seem that complicated in that the absence of pain does not create pleasure. The absence of work does not create rest, right? It's an absence of work, but there are still positive things that are incumbent on someone to rest in a certain way, right? You don't sleep 25 hours. So am I missing an underlying complexity to the question?
No, I don't think that we're missing a complexity. I'm just saying that there's something lacking in my understanding of what the mitzvah is, right? What's the mitzvah? What am I trying to accomplish here? What's the objective I'm trying to reach?
If I have Shvisah on Shabbat, which means that I have to refrain from work, and Shvisah on Yom Kippur means that I can't eat or drink.
Right.
So does that follow through into the Chag somehow, or there?
Yeah, but I'm saying, but I have a los aseh. So my question is, right? I already have a los aseh that accomplishes that. So what more am I doing? What's the aseh accomplishing? What's the aseh accomplishing that the los aseh isn't getting me to? Right? If let's say I did not have the lot aseh. I did not have the aseh. So what would be lacking in my Yom Tov?
Any positive action of rest. It would just be the absence of melachah.
But what's a positive action of rest?
Well, so you said you didn't want to get into like the details of what the mitzvah, the actions of the mitzvah, that you were going deeper. So all I'm suggesting is whatever those actions are accomplishing a active rest rather than the absence of malacha.
Right. But here's the problem. There are none of those.
Fair.
Those things don't exist. So if we had something to talk about, then my question wouldn't stand. Right? If I was told because of Shvisah on Yom Tov, I have to do A, B, and C, right? Much like every other mitzvah. So then great. Okay. But guess what? There is no such thing. Right? So that's my problem. Everybody see my that's the essential dilemma. That's the essential challenge when it comes to this mitzvah. What exactly is the mitzvah? What am I trying to accomplish? What am I trying to do? So on the one hand, I want to know, what do I actually have to do? Right? Is there something I have to do? Is there an action list? That's number one. And number two, what am I trying to accomplish? What's the objective here that I'm not getting to? Right? If I haven't right, what's the objective that I'm getting to if I what's the word here I'm looking for? If I don't have anything, right? If I have nothing to do, so then what's my objective? And how do I reach that objective? By doing nothing. Those are my questions. Okay. Okay. So if you look through like sources 1 through, I'll scroll down here. If you look at sources like 1 through 5, or 1 through 6, really, right? So you see that all the Yom Tovim have the same din of Shvisah, but they're all separate mitzvos, right? It says you have to be like lishvos on each one, but it's the exact same thing, right? So I could see if I was making my list. Let's save some ink here, right? And I'll say there's one mitzvah Shvisah that applies on each of the days, right? So there's one mitzvah Shvisah. When do I have to do that mitzvah Shvisah? You have to do that mitzvah Shvisah on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. You have to do that mitzvah Shvisah on the first day of Sukkot, and on Shmini Atzeres. You have to do that on the first day of Pesach, the last day of Pesach, and Shavuos. Okay, one mitzvah. Do it all those days. So why does each day count as its own mitzvah Shvisah? How does that make sense? Everybody see that? I don't understand how the Rambam came up to this counting, where he counted each day of Yom Tov as its own mitzvah Shvisah. How does that work? Right? Everybody see? That's my next question. Okay. And then going back to our last shiur, what's the difference between the Shabbaton of Yom Tov and the Shabbaton of Yom Kippur? Okay? They're both Shabbaton. Okay? So why on Yom Kippur do I have a separate Shabbos? Okay. Then you have a Mishnah Megillah, it's source number 7. You have a Mishnah Megillah that says as follows: Ein ben Yom Tov l'Shabbos al Okel Nefesh Bilvad. Right? There's no difference between the Yom Tov and Shabbos except for Ochel Nefesh. Right? Ochel Nefesh is the only difference. Ochel Nefesh means that I'm allowed to cook on Yom Tov. cooking on Shabbat is a Issa d'oraisa. I'm not allowed to cook on Shabbos, right? But cooking on Yom Tov, that's encouraged. You should cook on Yom Tov, right? That's encouraged. Okay. So right. So you say right. So just looking at if there's anything here that's worthwhile. Okay, and then also right, I could ask that we have different punishments for no, sorry, that's a different question. Okay, so you say like this. You have what we want to know. There's a mitzvah almost. It's not actually a mitzvah, but it's encouraged to cook on Yom Tov. If you cook on Yom Tov, the food is fresher than if you cooked the day before, right? So if you ever have a grill, right? We all know if you grill on Erev Yom Tov, right? It doesn't taste as good as you barbecue on Yom Tov itself, right? It's going to taste better, right? So if you do it fresh, so it's encouraged to cook on Yom Tov if you can, okay? So that's the right. So the question is like this: on Yom Tov, the Shvisah does not include cooking. Okay, right? Does everybody see that? Okay, it doesn't include cooking. So how do we understand this? Right? How do we understand this? Does this mean that on Yom Tov there's like an exception? Right? Like the Shvisah, but you're allowed to cook. Right? So how do we get that? So here's something just to know on a methodological level. Okay. And this is important. When you're studying halacha, a lot of times it's very easy to say there's an exception to the rule. Okay, very easy to say there's an exception to the rule. Here's the general rule, and there's an exception. You can't. That's not a valid explanation. It's not a valid svara in halacha, and I'll explain to you why. Okay, what an exception to the rule means on a philosophical level, and it plays itself into how we understand halacha, is that there's a general rule, and it couldn't take into account everything, right? Not everything could be taken into account by the one who made the rule. So they had to create exceptions, okay? So there was we had two values that we wanted to accomplish, but the two values, in order to accomplish them, there's going to be actions that contradict each other. So therefore we say, oh no, that's the rule, and then there's an exception so that we can accomplish the second value. That would mean that the creator of the system couldn't come up with a rule that was so ironclad that it can include both values. We're essentially limiting God. So we take that idea and chuck it. It's lazy man's svara to say exception to the rule. It's also not true. Okay, so we never say the words and never explain something by exception to the rule. In order to explain something, it has to be part and parcel of the rule itself. Somehow it has to fit into the rule itself. Everybody understand? Okay, so when you take cooking on Yom Tov, you could say, right, the lazy man's svara is to say, well, really, cooking is not allowed when it comes to Shvisah, right? When the Torah says to lishbos, to refrain, so you're not allowed to cook. Okay, that's the rule. But on Yom Tov, you're allowed to cook. It's an exception, right? So that's lazy man's svara. That can't work. It has to be that part of Shvisah on Yom Tov includes the ability to cook. That has to work. Okay, everybody sees.
And simply by saying that there's a pasuk for it, is that included in your exception to the rule?
No. So what is it? So when we say there's a pasuk, right? There's another good methodological rule. Okay. So when you say there's a pasuk to something, right? So a lot of people use a pasuk as a proof. A pasuk isn't the proof. You can't say the pasuk is a proof. What a pasuk is it lets you in that there's a deeper concept here. There's a more complex concept that you have to break down into its component parts. So yes, there is a pasuk that tells me that we learn out that I could cook, but that doesn't explain to me how cooking is a part of the mitzvah Shvisah. That just tells me that it is. And how do I know? Because God said so. Okay, great. I'm glad that God said so. Now I want to understand what God said and how it operates. How does this work? Right? See what I'm saying? That's what I want to figure out. So the pasuk, yes, there is a pasuk that tells me I can cook. And by examining the pasuk, maybe I can understand the explanation. But I need to explain the role of cooking inside Shvisah on Yom Tov. Okay? And what that really tells me, by the fact that I can cook on Yom Tov, it tells me that the mitzvah Shvisah is conceptually different on Yom Tov than it is on Shabbos. Because on Yom Tov, Shvisah allows me to cook. Right? So that must mean that the Shvisah is by nature different, right? And we see another proof to the fact that Shvisah, did everybody caught that move that I just said? Okay. Okay. So another proof that Shvisah on Yom Tov is different than the Shvisah on Shabbos, right? Is the fact that there's a different punishment for violating Shvisah on Yom Tov than on Shabbos. On Shabbos, if I violate Shvisah on purpose, right, knowingly with witnesses and everything else, they're going to put me to death, right? And if I did it, and if they didn't have witnesses, then I'm going to get kares, right? If I do it accidentally, I'm going to have to give a korban chatas. While on Yom Tov, that's not true. On Yom Tov, I'm going to get makos. I'm going to get lashes from Beis Din, right? So that means that Shvisah on Shabbos and Yom Tov is another proof that it's different. Okay, everybody sees?
Yeah, Rabbi, why wouldn't cooking fall under on Yontif melachah rather than Shvisah? Meaning, right? We have the prohibition and we have the positive mitzvah, or the mitzvah and the prohibition. On Shabbos, it doesn't obviously it doesn't fall under Shvisah in the same way it does on Yom Tov, but it's malacha, right? Certainly, cooking is malacha, correct, on Shabbos?
Yeah.
So it seems like on Yontif, two things are happening, right? We're alleviating the malacha of cooking, and you're putting it, and there's my question, into the category of Shvisah, which is a mitzvah.
No, whoa, hold on. That was a massive jump you just made the second part. Okay. That's huge. No, we're not saying that you should cook in order to fulfill Shvisah. Okay. Right? Because then that would be an action, right? It should be you shall cook. There is no you shall cook, right? There's a you are allowed to cook. And cooking doesn't violate neither lo saseh melacha, nor does it violate Shvisah on Yom Tov.
Okay, so that was my question, because I thought you were putting cooking into the category of Shvisah as a mitzvah, but aren't you really saying on Yom Tov cooking is not malacha?
Right, cooking, right, correct. I'm saying
okay, but we've been using the word Shvisah.
Yeah, but now I'm asking if cooking is not malacha, right? Okay, so cooking is not malacha. So now Shvisah is also different, because if you say to me, what does Shvisah look like? So if I show you Shabbos will mean that no one's in the kitchen.
Agreed. The difference, I think, is once you remove something as malacha, then it has, let's call it, downstream effects. But it has to first come out of the category of malacha.
Why? Yeah, I was about to say, how do you know which is upstream, downstream? Maybe the mitzvah Shvisah is upstream.
Well, because you just said there's no positive obligation to cook.
Right, but I'm saying, but there's within Shvisah, right? I don't know which is first, second, higher, lower, chicken, egg, right? But I just know that lo saseh melacha and Shvisah have the exact same dinim. And on Yom Tov, those dinim are that I can cook.
Right. So in certain cases it's a chicken and egg, but in a case where there is no prohibition anymore, right? Malacha, and in this case now it's not prohibited, and then there's no positive statement or positive mitzvah that you have to cook, it would seem that it has to be downstream from malacha.
Why?
Because in that sense, it's changing the malacha between, or what's defined as malacha between Shabbos and Yom Tov, but Shvisah doesn't have a positive component to it, at least yet in our discussion. So how could it come out of the malacha category relative to Shabbos, but it not have a positive in Shvisah, but then you would say Shvisah comes first? That doesn't make sense.
No, because I'm saying like this, we don't know. Our problem is we don't know. What we know is lo saseh melacha, because that's easy to define because we have melachos. But we don't know what composes Shvisah yet. So therefore, we just assume that, right, what the assumptions that you're making, right, which is that cooking is a melacha. So we've just simply taken out of the category of melacha, and therefore it must flow into Shvisah somehow, right? But we don't know what Shvisah is composed of. All I know is that Shvisah on Yom Tov looks much different than it does on Shabbos, even though they're both called the exact same thing.
Okay.
Right. So I don't know for sure if what the approach that you're taking is correct, because how am I supposed to know that? Right. I have to define what Shvisah is. That's where I got to go first. And then once I come up with a definition of Shvisah, right, by gathering my facts, right? So now, right, all I've seen right now until this point is sort of like negatives about Shvisah, right? I haven't seen any positive, I don't have any positive information about Shvisah, right? There's nothing I can point to and be, oh, you know what Shvisah is? Shvisah is this. We don't have that yet. So until I have that, I can't go by eliminating negatives and try to then come up to what Shvisah is, or try to define Shvisah by juxtaposing it versus other mitzvos. I'm not going to be able to do that. Okay. So look what the Rambam says here in source number 11. Okay. So he says like this. This is the Rambam says, Shishas Yamim Ha'elu Shasun HaKasav L'Asiyas Melacha Shein Rishon L'Shvi Shal Pesach, right? Shmini Shal Chag, Yegilis, all the dates. Okay, Echad L'Shvi Behen Nikram Yom Tovim, right? So these days are called Yom Tovim. The Rambam says, and then he says, Shishas Kulam Shava Shehem Asurim B'chol Melechas Avoda Chutz Melacha Sheyitzar Chakila. Okay, so the Shvisah on all of them is obligatory, right? Why? Because it says that they're usher. What makes it? I mean, I'm gonna bold it here. What makes it? Because of melechas avoda. Okay, that's what I'm forbidden to do. Asurin b'chol melechas avoda chutz melacha sheyitzar chakila, except for things that are needed for eating. Okay. And then he says, kol hashoves melechas avoda be'echad mehen harihu kayam mitzvos aseh. Okay, so as soon as I rest from doing this melachas avoda, okay, and again I'm gonna bold the phrase here, right? For one of them, hari kayam mitzvos aseh. So I fulfill the mitzvos aseh. Shari nemar behen shabaso, klomar shvus. V'chol osa melacha behen melacha she'ino letzarach achila. Can go in Shabana or Haras, right? You list a bunch of things. Hari batal mitzvos aseh. V'avra los aseh. Shnemar kol melachas avoda. Losasu, right? What am I not allowed to do? I'm not allowed to do melechas avoda. Okay. Okay, fine, good. Okay, now let's look at source number 15 here. Okay, we've seen this pasuk I think before. Okay, so the Rambam God calls these days mikra kodesh. Okay, they're how do you translate mikra kodesh? A calling to sanctity, right? That's what these days are. Okay, they're a calling to sanctity. So yelachem Shabbat, and then how do you make them a day of sanctity? How do you make them that? Right? You have Shabbason. Okay, so the Ramban helps us out a great deal here. Okay, the Ramban says yelachem Shabbason sheyeh yom Shvisah lanoach bo. Right? So noach bo, to rest on those days. Okay. So now, finally, we have a positive sort of definition of Shabbason, right? What does the Ramban tell us? The Ramban tells us that Shabbason is a day that you rest on, right? It's a day lanuach bo, okay? That seems to be that could either be the Maisa or that could be the objective. We're not sure yet, right? That's what it is, okay? And what do we accomplish by having a nuach bo, by resting on those days? What does that do? What does that create? If I rest on the day, what does it create? Mikra kodesh, right? Then it creates a mikra kodesh. By resting on Yom Tov, I've created this calling to sanctity, mikra kodesh. Okay, that's what I've done. Okay, so now I have something I could go on. I have some information that I could bite my teeth into, and I could understand things here. Okay, so now my question is like this: what's the nature? Right, let's go over our questions, and then I'll give a svara and I'll give the answers. I think we're gonna have a shorter shiur than usual this time. Okay, so what's the nature of the mitzvah of Shvisah and Yom Tov was our first question. Right, what is the mitzvah of Shvisah? Our second question is what's the difference between the mitzvah of Shvisah and the Isser melachah? Right, of Los Asu Melacha. Right, we said that we wanted to know why each of these have to be their own mitzvos. Why can't we just have one general mitzvah that applies to all the Yom Tovim? Okay. We want to know what the difference is between this and the Shvisah of Yom Kippur. Okay. What's the role of Okhal Nefesh? And how are there different punishments for Shvisah and Shabbos and Shvisah and Yom Tov if both of them are Shvisah? Okay, those were our questions. Anyone want to give it a shot here as a svara? I set this up very nicely. Or not? Okay. How about I take it this week? Okay, so say it like this. Okay. So here's what I'd like to say. The prohibition of melachah, okay, of doing melachah on Yom Tov is lo sasat melachas avoda. You can't do melachas avoda. Okay, what's melachas avoda? Melachas avoda is creative work. Okay, you can't do creative work on Yom Tov. That's the prohibition. If I do creative work on Yom Tov, I've violated this mitzvah. Now, I've also negated the mitzvah's aseh, right, of Shvisah. I've also, right, I haven't fulfilled the mitzvah. But when it comes to a mitzvah, we have a different language that we want to use. We want to know what's the objective of this mitzvah. What am I trying to? By resting on Yom Tov, what am I accomplishing? So what's the answer to that? Right? By resting on Yom Tov, what am I accomplishing? Mikra Kodesh. I've created a Mikra Kodesh. Okay, that's what I've done. I've created a kedusha to the day. Okay, I want to make sure very clear here. When we say the word kadosh, take out all philosophical understandings you might have of kedusha. We're not going to go into them. We're not going to say which ones are valid. It doesn't make a difference. Just assume there's a status of kedusha. That's all it is. It's a halachic status. It has nothing to do with something's holy, not holy, sanctified. It doesn't make a difference. It's just kadosh. Okay. Certain days have kedusha. Certain days do not. By resting, what I've done is I've created a mikra kodesh. Okay. I've created a day of kedusha. Okay. That's what's done. So now, what's the nature of the mitzvah Shvisah on Yom Tov? Based on that, right? So what it is, okay, by refraining from doing melachah, okay, I've rested, and I've created a day of kedusha. I've created this mikra kodesh, right? So that's the objective. That's what I've done here. Okay.
Are you saying that I didn't have Shvisah on Yom Tov? Yom Tov would not be considered mikra kodesh because I didn't do Shvisah?
No, it's not that every individual. It's not that every individual gives the kedusha to the day, but I have to create this. I have to participate and be makdish the yom by creating a mikra kodesh, and I do that by Shvisah. So it's not that the day is it's my day is lacking, right? My day is lacking because I haven't participated, right, in the mikra kodesh. But it's not like if I don't keep Rosh Hashanah or I don't keep Sukkot, it's not like it gets erased from my calendar that there was no Sukkot for me that year, right? But the way that I match up to mikra kodesh, how do I have the day as a mikra kodesh? How do I lend it the day to kedusha is by Shvisah. I have to match up with that ideal.
So, Rabbi, maybe I missed the transition, but what's the difference in creating that mikra kodesh of withdrawing from melachah, right? Meaning not, doing something prohibited, versus now you're saying, maybe through the Rambam that you're resting and therefore you're accomplishing the rest, meaning we still don't have the delta, the difference between not doing malacha and doing shvisah.
Well, no, I think there's a huge difference. The question is, what's your metric for differences, right? So my metric for differences, what am I trying to accomplish? In the losa say, I'm not trying to accomplish anything. I'm prohibited from doing certain actions, right? When it comes to a mitzvah, there's a halachic objective. So what's the halachic objective I'm trying to accomplish, right? So there is no you could do this, but you can't do that, right? If I right, there's not going to be a nafkamina. There's not going to be an active difference, right? But there is in terms of the nature of the two mitzvos, right? That's where the difference lies, okay? And there has to, as I just finished one thing, there has to be that difference in the nature, or else one of them is extraneous.
Right. So, but from a functional standpoint, and I know you're talking about the framework, you can't do one without the other.
Right. There's no way you'll be able to say, you know what, this Yom Tov. Oh no, you know what? I'll give you an example. There's okay. So this is interesting because I heard this from a Talmid Chacham who turned out to be a huge Russia. So I'm always hesitant in in quoting. So I'm not going to quote his name, but like I mean like all of us here like hands down would all agree that this person's a massive Russia. As with the penal system who put him in jail. But the Svar was incredible. He asked the question. He gave a shiur. This was 24 years ago. He gave this shiur, and he said as follows. He asked the question: if I slept through all of Shabbos or Yom Tov, right? If I took a pill and I slept through all of Shabbos and Yom Tov, would I fulfill the mitzvah of Shvisah? Right. So I definitely didn't do any melachah. Right, so for sure didn't do any melacha, but could I accomplish mikra kodesh? That's why I'm throwing that in now. He didn't call it mikra kodesh, right? But would I be able to accomplish mikra kodesh if I actually didn't do anything? I just slept. I missed the entire day, right? So would I have accomplished it? So he wanted to suggest. I'm not giving you an answer now because I'd like to look through it more. He'd like to suggest that part of mikra kodesh, part of this kedushas hayom, is making kiddush. There's things that the Rambam has a mitzvah on Yom Tov to go to shul. Yeah, so he actually has a mitzvah that you should go to shul and say Hallel and dress up. That's a mitzvah according to the Ramban on Yom Tov. So he says those things, those are things you should do. So sleeping wouldn't be enough. But the way we're approaching it until this point, Shvisah alone, right, based on the Makaros that we've seen, taking out what he said, so then you could sleep through all of Yom Tov and you've accomplished. Maybe you could say you've done even better. Right? Is he really out of it, right? Really resting. So but that would be like the one time I could think of where there could be a difference. But again, that's going a step further by adding in other mitzvos.
Got it. Thank you.
So now we understand what's the difference, right? This is essentially your question, right? What's the difference between the mitzvah of Shvisah on the Isser Malacha, right? So we're saying there's no practical difference. The difference is in terms of a conceptual difference in terms of what they're trying to accomplish. Okay, that's the difference between them. Okay, now I think this is like where we really see the complexity and the beauty of this svara comes in this question. Why?
Rabbi, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Before you start, is it possible that the difference between the Asa and Lota says, instead of looking at it as the Mikra Kodesh as like a 1 and not Mikra Kodesh as a 0, maybe if you do the mitzvah Asa, it goes to the 1, the Kodesh. But if you do the Malacha, it's worse than a 0. It's worse than not just going Kodesh. It's profaning the day. So you're going to a -1. So maybe that's the difference that. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, no, I definitely understand.
Okay.
I'm trying to think if it's correct, right? Like if you're mechal the mikra kodesh, is there something worse? I'm just trying to think to understand how to put that into some sort of a framework. What's the metric system that we're going by? How do I what's worse than the negative that you're talking about? In other words, what's worse than that not having mikra kodesh? You want to say that there's like chilul mikra kodesh,
right? Exactly.
Desecration of mikra kodesh. So is that somehow worse? I don't know if it's definitely worse for the individual, right? Because the individual now, like when it comes to Shabbos, let's say the individual is a Baal Kares, right? So that's definitely worse, right? That's for sure. That would work on Shabbos. The question is if that says like something about you, I don't know, like or your day, I don't know.
Okay.
That's a good question. I'm not sure. Okay. Okay. So now this is I really like this far when it comes to this now. Why did the Rambam list all these as different mitzvos, right? Why is the first day of Pesach one mitzvah Shvisah and the last day of Pesach another day of Shvisah and the first day of Sukkot right? Why couldn't this just be one mitzvah Shvisah that applies to all the days, right? That was our question here, right? So this I really liked. Okay. the mitzvah of creating sanctity, right, of this Mikra Kodesh, okay, it expresses itself on different days, right? If you would just say that it expresses itself on different days, it wouldn't make each day kadosh. In other words, the chiddush of having each day having its own mitzvah means that each day must be established as its own Mikra Kodesh. Okay? In other words, like this, if Shvisah was one mitzvah that applied on each of the days, right? Let's say Shvisah applied on each of the days, okay? Right? Am I following? If Shvisah applied on each of the days, so then I wouldn't be necessarily creating an individual and unique kedusha to each Yom Tov. But each Yom Tov has its own unique kedusha to it, right? And that's what each mitzvah is doing. On my first day of Pesach, I'm creating a unique and different kedusha than I had on the seventh day of Sukkot. And that's why that's not why it's its own mitzvah, but that's what each mitzvah creates, right? So I'm not explaining why it has to be that way. I'm explaining what the achievement or what the accomplishment of each mitzvah is now that it's its own mitzvah.
And so, Rabbi, would you take the next step and say, therefore, Shvisah on each of those days, in some sense, the mitzvahs that we have on those days help define Shvisah, meaning eating matzah on Pesach would be part of Shvisah of Pesach?
No, I don't think so. I think those are mitzvahs hayom, right? So those lend to the uniqueness and the nature of the day, but not to the kedusha of the day. Okay. Now a day has a multiplicity of aspects to it, right? So it has the kedusha hayom, and it has the mitzvah of that day, what makes that day unique. Okay, fair enough. Okay. Okay. See, some of you are moving. I don't know. Okay. So,
I lost you for about 30 seconds. Yeah.
Okay, so let me just repeat the last point, that each day, right? Each day has its own unique nature to it. So the mitzvah of Pesach, right? The mitzvah of Pesach has like the theme of, or the nature to it is cherus. That's where freedom. That's where matzah comes in. And then on Rosh Hashanah, the nature of the day is year of a pacha, right? It's a day of fear and awe. And on Sukkot, it's simcha yisera, it's greater simcha. Those stem from the mitzvahs of the day. The kedusha of the day, remains the same, but unique in each one, but not unique in terms of the nature of the day that stems from the mitzvahs. Okay. Okay.
Are you saying that this is a way of explaining why the Rambam lists each day separate? If the Rambam didn't do that, would we still come with the same conclusion?
No. So if the Rambam didn't say this, I'm not explaining why the Rambam did what he did. I'm explaining, now that the Rambam explains it this way, what's the Rambam saying? Right? So what the Rambam is saying is that each day has its own unique Mikra Kodesh. Right? I don't know like why each day has its own Mikra Kodesh. That's not what I'm delving into now. I'm just saying now what I've come to the conclusion of is that each day has its own Mikra Kodesh, as shown and demonstrated by the fact that each day has its own mitzvah Shvisah. Why that is, I don't know why.
And you can't say that is because each Yom Tov is qualitatively different than the next Yom Tov.
I don't know how.
Everyone has its own nature, its own mitzvah.
Right. So I don't know if the two are connected. I don't have anything that tells me that it's like what John was saying before. I don't have anything that tells me, bless you, that the mitzvah of matzah is connected to the nature of the unique kedusha of the day of the first day of Pesach. I just don't have that.
What proof do you need?
It sounds good. It sounds good and it's symmetrical. I just don't know if it's true.
Why wouldn't it be true?
I don't have any reason why not. But just because I don't have a reason to say it's not true doesn't mean it is true. I need something to tell me that it is true in order for it to be true. If I don't have anything that tells me it's true, just because it sounds good doesn't mean it is true. I can make it sound great. I could say it match up perfectly, but I don't know if it works. I just don't know. Okay. Okay. Okhal nefesh, right? What role does okhal nefesh play, right? So okay. So here, right? So here I think that we have to go back to that idea of competing values. Okay. There's a value that Yom Tov has that Shabbos does not have. Okay. And that value is simcha. Okay. Yom Tov is separated and unique and distinct from Shabbos. The Shabbos does not have the mitzvah of simcha. Simcha is a samachta b'chagecha, right? So that's a mitzvah that is shared in all the chagim, right? So the samachta b'chagecha, all your chagim have the mitzvah simcha to it, okay? And that mitzvah simcha is fulfilled primarily by eating, okay? By eating and drinking, right? So the mitzvah of simcha is enhanced with fresh food. This is where the okhal. This is the nature of the matir, of the allowance of okhal nefesh, is to better fulfill the mitzvah of simcha. So the Shvisah on Yom Tov is defined, and maybe I should have added a source or two on this. But the mitzvah of Shvisah is sort of defined by the mitzvah of simcha. What makes that day more unique? Okay, what makes that day more unique is the fact that it has a mitzvah of simcha to it. Okay, that there's the mitzvah of simcha that comes along with the mitzvah of Shvisah. Okay, of Yom Tov, and therefore Ochel Nefesh is allowed because it enhances that mitzvah of simcha. Okay, that's what I would. That's how I understand it. Okay, and then lastly, what generates the different punishments? Right, for violating Shvisah on Yom Tov and Shabbos, right? Why is there kares and kares since there is a chayv misa on Shabbos, but not so much on Yom Tov? On Yom Tov you have makos, okay? So really, just to be clear, this applies to the los aseh, right? The punishment comes from a los aseh, not from a bittul aseh, okay? But on Shabbos, the Shvisah is connected to a much greater idea, which is Maisa Bereshis, right? Like in other words, the Shvisah on Shabbos is connected to one of the fundamentals of our faith, and therefore, this is what I think. I think that only when a mitzvah is connected to the fundamentals of our faith are you going to be chayav misa on it. It has to be at a much greater level. Okay, not to take away from Yom Tov, right? And I don't want to say but Yom Tov not so much. But Yom Tov is not related to the fundamentals of our faith. That's not where it's coming in. So Shabbos plays a special role, right? So, we always see somebody who violates Shabbos is put into a different category as somebody who violates other mitzvos, right? So Shabbos is its own type of thing. So I think that's the reason why, there's a difference between Shabbos, the punishments of violating Shabbos, and the punishments of violating Yom Tov.
So Rabbi, I think that last part is a beautiful concept, but how is Pesach and God's interaction with us and leaving Egypt not a fundamental aspect of our faith, right? One is creation and one is God's action, on a hashgacha pratis level.
So it is, you're very good. And I'll tell you, I don't know why it works its way out this way, just because, or how, because I haven't really delved into it, but there is kares when it comes to Pesach. And that kares comes from Korban Pesach. Right, so like unlike Shabbos, where there's no unique korban for Shabbos, right? There's musaf, but musaf goes everywhere, right? So here, when it comes to Yom Tov on Pesach, there's something better than Shvisah that reflects that nature, and what that is is the Korban Pesach. So yeah, so 100% your intuition was correct that it should be there on Pesach as well. Okay. Okay.
And the same thing holds true for eating on Yom Kippur.
And eating on Yom Kippur, exactly right. Eating on Yom Kippur, same as well. I mean, there's 36 things to get kares for. I don't know if all of them are going to relate to some fundamental of faith. There's some things that for sure not. But I think that when it comes to the positive commands, I think that's true. But that differentiates between Yom Tov and Shabbos. Okay. Now here's the big challenge. This is the big challenge. We don't have Shiur because all of you don't live here, except for my father. So for the next 4 weeks we don't have Shiur, right? Next this Sunday is Rosh Hashanah, then the next Sunday is Yom Kippur, right? Then the next for me it will be Yom Kippur or close enough that I can't get Shiur. Then the next Sunday is the second day of Sukkot, Yom Tov Sheni of Goliath, and then the next is you have this thing called Simchas Torah, which we don't even have the clock, right? We only have Shmini Atzeres. So that's the next one. So for 4 weeks now, we don't have Shiur. So the question is going to be 4 weeks from now when I put out, okay, here's the Ma'aser Komos on Motzei Simchas Torah, are we still going to be just as committed to Shiur? So I'm begging you. I live for this Shiur, guys. You don't understand. I got to tell you, like, I know maybe you gain something from this, but like I need to be giving an Iyun Shiur at like during my year. This is the first time I've ever not had to give an Iyun Shiur. So I had to create this. So please don't lose the commitment when we come back. And if you have a friend or someone that wants to join in, so bring them as well. Okay. Everybody should have a Shana Tova, a Gemar Chasima Tova, a Chag Sameach, and may everybody's wishes for growth come true and everybody be healthy.
Amen. Gemar Chasima Tova.
Thank you.
You, Rabbi.
Shana Tova, guys.
Thank you.
Shana Tova.